So Gaza War, October 7th, 2024, year two. We are in year two of the Gaza War. I think we're on day 21 of the Lebanon War if the pager attack is counted as day one, which I guess it was.
That's the day I started a
That's the day
Hezbollah
you
log.
clock it, right? So yeah, John, I often go back and listen to sit reps that I've done or podcasts that I've done, try to figure out whether I have any verbal tics or
Oh yeah?
anything to work out. I figure by listening to myself, I can improve a little bit. The sleepy vibe is the sleepy vibe. It's just a function of how late we record. But um I don't have the heart. I don't have the heart to listen to the one where we broke down Nasrallah's last speech. I haven't gone back to that one. We talked about how confident he was. We talked like the way we talked that day, how much reassurance he had brought us. And I can't watch it.
Yeah. I guess we haven't talked about that on the air yet.
No.
Yeah. Unbelievable series of events that are really hard to wrap your brain around.
Yeah.
And yeah, the fact that it kept continuing to happen, I think is just shocking.
Yeah. The best theories that I heard were from Elijah Magnier, and he kind of thought that they had a lot of those leaders had been kind of tagged, kind of made by Israel in Syria
Yeah.
through their Syria interventions. And so
Yeah.
it was just a question of when they were going to do it. Or
Yeah.
if. Not just when, but if, because
Yeah. If.
it's a crazy thing to do. It's a crazy, crazy thing to do. There have been times I gather that they've known where Nasrallah was and could have killed him and decided that it was too crazy of a thing to do.
Yeah, there used to be red lines. There
Yeah,
used to be red lines. I don't think that any Zionist fantasy could have ever imagined the freedom of
purposes.
action that they have were granted in this 3 week period. I mean, in this 1 year period of time is what set this set the table for it. But even just in that 3 week period of time, I don't think in their wildest fantasy they could have imagined that. Just like I don't think in their wildest fantasy they could imagine that they could just destroy Gaza, like completely destroy it. Um, this and
Yeah.
this is what the United States just gave them. It gave them
Th-
that, and then they're looking at this period of time where there's 4 or 5 months until there's even going to be talk of something happening in the States, right? Like it's not happening till if it ever
this is
happens.
not how it's going to happen. It's
Yeah,
not how it's going to happen. And this is why I've been behind. I've been behind. We've all been behind, but unable to grasp the willingness of US and Israel to commit acts that are counterproductive, irrational to their own interests, to their own long-term interests.
yeah,
And so that's what I keep thinking about Nasrallah, about how every time he would come to the microphone, he would explain how whether they talk crazy or not, they have to accept reality, and they will have to accept reality, the reality that their army is in no position to attack Lebanon, the
no,
reality that they can't continue on the economic course that they're on, the reality that their support in the world is permanently lost.
permanently lost.
And apparently, no, they don't have to answer to reality, and
Not
so
yet.
that is something that it confounds people who try to analyze the situation or try to make sense of it, because how do you make sense of it?
Yeah.
And
I
I
think
don't
we
think
were
they're
pretty early
acting.
on.
Yeah.
we were pretty early on in identifying that the lack of self-preservation instinct in Israel.
Mhm.
Uh, but the process, it's just such a devastating process to watch happen because, yeah, it's expediting the demise of Israel, which is, the ultimate, like, at obvious necessity at this point. I think that's pretty clear to everybody. I just think there's so many, like, in the way that we've handled these sit reps and the way that we handle the EI show, dating, numbering every show,
Yeah.
as if, um, that there's going to be a pause, a break, an end, even
Yeah.
just an interim period, that there isn't, and they just keep hurtling. I mean, I don't know if they're hurtling. I'm not sure. I haven't caught the sit reps that you've talked about Lebanon, but I'm still not totally convinced that we're seeing a ground invasion of Lebanon. I still think all the things that I've said on this show for
You don't
how
think
have
it's
I,
you
I
don't
don't
think it's a good idea.
I don't think they're capable.
Well,
I don't think they're capable of doing it. And nothing that we've seen in the last, whatever day. I pulled a map. I got a map up here on the
yeah, I
wall.
was showing maps in my last. I was showing the topography of Marun al
Yeah.
Ras and Yarun.
Yeah.
They're just trying to take that hill.
But they
It's
can't.
a
They can't.
hamburger hill
Yeah.
kind of
And
situation.
there's not multiple ways into Lebanon, and
Right.
they've been through the reason they're going in through Marun al Ras and Odessa is because they're scared to go through Wadi Hajar, which was the graveyard of the Merkaba. There's just,
After Marun al Ras, there's a next hill, and
yeah,
then there's Bint Jbeil. So
yeah.
it's not like it's not like Marun al Ras wins you the war.
No,
It's
and they're
just
not
the
even, and they're
first
now,
hill.
yeah, and it's been more than a week of them boasting about operations that they don't appear to be really happening. They don't appear to
Like
be.
killing 400 Hezbollah fighters and
I mean, we have a year of knowing that garbage, right?
yeah.
Like that they just put those numbers. I mean, even if they lied about those numbers in a little bit more elegant way, like saying 56 or something, but just when they throw out these round numbers and they
Yeah.
just do it. I follow part of my Qassam log is it has an IDF section in the log for each day. So
Yeah.
I log these things that they say every day, and they just throw it around. It doesn't have any connection to reality, and they just throw hundreds around. They said it again too. They reinvaded Jabalia over the weekend, and they immediately throw out that the 162nd Division it killed 250 people. It's like you're killing 250 people if you're counting the
The
massacres in
children. Yeah.
in the school shelters, and
Yeah.
they're not killing hundreds of fighters in one day of engagement. Nobody that's watched this war for the last year believes 100, 200 Qassam fighters are falling in a single battle. That is not how the
How do
war
they
has been
how
fought.
yeah, when did you ever see 100 fighters together ever? I mean, maybe October 7th.
No, yeah.
That's about it. That
It's
was the last
yeah.
time.
It's just disgusting. It's brutal. As a human being, it's devastating,
But
and
this is the thing. Like
they're winning.
the thing
The
is,
resistance is winning.
the resistance is winning. The resistance is winning, but it's just so the resistance is up against this. I don't know how else to put it. And people get on my case for saying these things are new, but a lot of these things are new. I'm sorry. There's like everybody wants to be a historian and say this is not new. This is how colonialism works.
Yeah.
This is how it's always been. Like, okay, I know. I know. I read those same things too. I've read them. But no, it's different. Things are different. That's the thing about history. Every situation is different. The future is different from the past. And there are many things that are different about this, including from other wars. And I think that this is part of the adjustment that I think we have to make in year two relative to year one, because I think that in year one, we were always hoping for America to come to its senses and call this thing off before it leads to a point of no return that means Israel's demise long term. I think that point of no return was sometime November 2023 when they decided to go back to war. And if it wasn't in 2023, then it was in September. It was in September when they blew up the pagers and killed Nasrallah. And those are one of those two was the point of no return. And and so now it's Israel's willingness to cross red lines, to sacrifice hostages, to sacrifice men now. I mean, they're just feeding men into Marun al Ras. They're just
Yeah.
feeding men, and somebody in the comments pointed out that it's funny that they go into urban warfare in Gaza with tanks and no infantry cover, and they're apparently going into village warfare in Lebanon with infantry and no tanks.
No tanks. They got their backpacks again, the same as 2006. And they're going to be videos of them. Well, they know better than to do. They used to allow in 2006 war, they allowed journalists to stand on the other side of the border inside Israel. And so there was that always that famous footage of the Israelis coming back from Lebanon looking
Right,
like a defeated army,
right.
dragging their knapsacks back into Israel. And now they make it a closed military zone. Well, it Hezbollah made it a closed military zone.
Yeah, that's
Uh,
also different. The amount of rocket fire on the Israelis as they're getting themselves organized, that happened a little bit in 2006, but this is way beyond that.
yeah.
So it's just constant Metula, Kfar
Yeah,
Galadi,
they got
Kiryat
three more
Shmona.
soldiers today with mortar fire.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then the first day, the October 1st, October 2nd operation where they lost nine when they basically stuck their foot across the line
Yeah.
and lost nine soldiers. And now they're not so sure
I,
about this ground operation. If you read their Israeli their statements, they're still saying targeted, delimited.
yeah, they
I
say
confess
that.
I
They said
didn't
that
know
about
that.
Rafa too. That's just like face saving in case it goes like it's going now, I guess.
Maybe, but there's 6,000 Radwan forces plus territorial defense forces that are a different situation than Rafa, where
And they
you
want
had they have the
revenge.
ability to smash Gaza, like we've seen that. They have the ability to smash and to use their tanks and smash. That it's not, they don't have that same capability in Lebanon.
Well, they're
So
fine. They have the belt of fire, but I guess it's met by rockets from the other side too. Not as much, but
yeah, and
that's
Hezbollah's dug in better.
yeah. So
And
they can hunker down and wait for the troops to come.
yeah.
The the what I'm wondering is what I was wondering yesterday with the when I was looking at the map was in 1982 they also went along the coast. There's a coastal road.
Mhm.
What happens when they try that? I guess we'll see. With naval, maybe with naval backup.
Yeah, I'm not sure they have not shown any signs of going on the western sector at all.
But it seems like something they've done before and maybe we'll do again.
Yeah, that's actually I'm not sure the territorial reason why
It's
that would be the
forested.
case.
Maybe they know, maybe Hezbollah has surprises for them there and they probably know that, but or maybe they're just, it might make sense to feint one way and go the other. The thing is it's not a feint if you lose 30 men after 30 men 4 days
No, and
ago.
you can't feint with divisions. They've got whole
Yeah.
divisions up there, so they're not going to sneak up on anybody. They're
I
moving
did see
entire.
a note that the Navy said they're joining the battle for what that's worth.
Yeah.
I know the Navy's pretty good at like shooting Gaza fishermen. I'm not sure
Yeah, they
what
can
they're
shell the shoreline.
yeah.
Um, There's no good way. There's no good way. And the assassinations were shocking to watch, but the organization doesn't run. That's not how the organization runs. You don't there it doesn't change the fact that you have 50, 60, 70,000. Nasrallah said
Yeah.
100,000 and chuckled.
Yeah.
You've got tens of thousands of battle-hardened soldiers who fought in multiple wars, fought in Syria house to house,
Yeah.
have
They know
trained.
what to do.
They
They
know
don't
what.
have to wait.
No,
They don't have to if they're in position and the Israelis come, they know what to do.
yeah, and you can't say like Nasrallah is a world historical figure. Um, there's no question, and it's a um, devastating loss. But there's no indication that second, third, fourth in command in these positions are somehow incapable. If anything, they're probably more capable and less. Like Nasrallah was
Yeah.
such a careful, such a careful man. Even when remember in the 2006 war, which began with a soldier capture raid,
Hmm.
after the war ended, he was asked on Lebanese TV, if you had known the civilian toll that this war
Mm.
would bring, would you do the operation? And he said, absolutely not. He didn't say, there's 100 answers that you could say absolutely not without saying absolutely not. And he didn't use those phrasings. He said, absolutely not. I would not, the one death. He's just a very
Yeah, it's
careful
all
leader
balance.
in position of a very, very powerful military force. Um, it's difficult in the first week or two to look for signs that things have changed and this is a more formidable organization. But 5, 10, 15 years down the line, there's no reason to believe that Hezbollah doesn't get stronger from this. And I guess we're going to ultimately talk about Abu Obeida, and that's what he
What
said. He made that point.
what do you make though of the fact that that 2012 speech that I'm always going back to when Nasrallah said the rules are different now, the equation is different now, we are capable of destroying Tel Aviv. And
Yeah,
if you bomb us like you did in '06, then we'll destroy, and we'll destroy. And I always go back to this gesture, like this thing he was
yeah,
doing, water plants, power plants, blah, blah, blah. But it
yeah.
hasn't happened. So
Yeah, so I do think, if that's the question, I do think that
yeah.
that is something that wiping out the entire command echelon would
Hmm.
prevent, because uh the new responsibilities of the new leader, the first thing that they do is not to immediately open fire, open a war, by targeting Tel Aviv in a way that was promised to them. I think that is a tangible impact of killing the military leadership in the short term window. That their move from there is not, this is the organization of strategic patience. The next person that comes in does not immediately say, now we care, now we blast Tel Aviv, we blast Haifa. Those decisions would come in a more um,
Hmm.
you know in a more patient way than that. And I do think that that is one of the outcomes, and I think that Israel, um, I think they took that into the equation, that the previous belief was that if they did what they did in these past 3 weeks, that Tel Aviv would be, or Haifa would be hit in such a strategic way, not just terror bombing, but hitting, significant infrastructure, that could lead to open war. And I don't think that, from Lebanon's point of view, from a Lebanese point of view, I don't think that open war against a country that's just shown, with the U.S. backing, that there's no limits. I don't think you throw your country into war without a very carefully calibrated decision. And I think that that is one thing you see from the military command being killed
And
is that
you
that
wouldn't
took
characterize the situation now as open war then.
no.
Hmm.
No, open war.
I
When
don't.
I say open war, I mean like I mean in some ways like 2006, like the destruction of the state of Lebanon, the destruction of the bridges, the electrical, the um I think that that decision cannot be made by it cannot be made in anger. It
No,
can't be
no. But
made as a retaliation.
hmm. Well,
And
I
I
don't
don't
I think Israel is proceeding along that line. So and I don't really
you believe
see.
that there's a like you believe there'll be Israeli troops in Bintish Bale.
Well, I don't know. That's a question of what happens in that's a question of how the battle proceeds and whether Hezbollah wants them to get that far. I mean, it could very well be that they let them in. I actually thought they were going to let them. I didn't know they were going to contest the those border areas as hard as they have. I thought
Yeah,
they
well,
would
we
let them
don't
go.
know because of this, the way that Hezbollah operates, because of the way that the UN resolution and the Lebanese army being in the area south of the Litani, we don't actually know a lot about the border area.
Hmm.
We know a lot about up further north. We know Bintage Bale is fortified and bunkered and has territorial defenses. The Israelis were sort of really keen to show that they found a tunnel, um, in Marun al Ras and in Odessa. Um, but
That's yeah.
we don't know the extent of the that tunnel network on the border.
But even
Um,
the field reports from Hezbollah have said we let them come. We saw them reconnoiter, we let them come back, and then we got up
yeah,
close and took them out.
yeah.
So,
Well, and those towns that are right on the border, Israel said the other day that they have carried out 700 operations across that border that Hezbollah has allowed them
mhm.
to do along the border areas uh, since October 7th or 8th. So um, it's yeah, Hezbollah is waiting for them.
Yeah.
They're not starting the war, and I think that that's
I guess what I'm saying is I think the war has started.
yeah.
I don't think I don't think there's any escaping it. For that matter, I don't think there's any escaping a war between Iran and the US anymore. I think Israel's gonna hit Iran again tomorrow or the next day or sometime soon, and then Iran's gonna hit them back.
Did you do a sit rep about that?
I sure did.
I mean, it looks like they got hit by 90% of the
Yeah.
weapons.
Yeah, it looks like Iran can do whatever the hell they want. And yeah, I mean, it's just so it's just so obvious that the resistance is trying to impose a certain kind of rationality on Israel that Israel's just not. So anything short of a huge massacre of Israelis, the Israelis are just thumbing their nose. They're like, haha, you didn't kill anybody. You didn't kill tens of thousands of children, so you're weak and we're strong.
Yeah. And I saw a poll, the New York Times had a poll from um, the like leading think tank in is like military think tank in Israel that said that 80% of Israeli Jews now have confidence in their military.
Yeah.
And it's just such a remarkable statement
Yeah.
because what is it that gave, because I remember quoting back in November and December that it
Mhm.
was like down to 40%. And
They
so
killed Nasrallah.
yeah, but
Yeah.
they didn't get their people back. They didn't defeat. Qassam. They haven't you know, they haven't thrown Hamas out of government. They haven't got their people back. And so what these people are saying is we support
Yeah,
we're our confidence
we've
we're
killed
our
hundreds of
confidence.
thousands of people. We killed lots of their leaders. We've destroyed
Yeah,
almost all the buildings.
all their schools, all their hospitals,
Yeah,
uh 15,000 at least of their children.
yeah.
And
We
that's for
control.
Israelis what that's what
Yeah,
builds their confidence back
we
in
can
their
starve them.
organization.
We can't. We can. We've turned off all the food. We've turned off the water. We've turned out the lights. We're
It's
awesome.
disgusting.
So, uh, and that, like, we said that at the beginning, right? We said that at the beginning, whether this was, whether, like, whose time, right? Like, can Israel complete their genocide before suffering state collapse? I don't think they're
Well,
close to state collapse, but I also don't, they're not, they're also nowhere near defeat because like Hezbollah, right? Like to take, everybody always says like, what are their objectives? So their objectives was to destroy Hamas. Hamas is doing just fine. Their objective with Hezbollah, I mean, like you go back to the 1982 invasion, there was no Hezbollah, first of all. And effectively there was no Lebanese army. There still isn't. They had huge allies in the country. They had independent militias that were working for them
yeah.
already. So people are like, "Oh, they're trying to get that going again." Okay, you can try to get that going again, but like they had that going for 5, 10 years before they invaded in 1982. They
Yeah.
invaded
And civil
to,
war before that to
yeah,
destroy the country.
yeah. So when they went in, it was like a different story altogether. They got all the way through fairly quickly, and they were occupying most of Lebanon. But it's a little bit different now. It's a little bit different of a situation because their objective also isn't to occupy Lebanon. Their objective is to destroy Hezbollah. So does that mean they're trying to destroy Hezbollah's army and Hezbollah's army is trying to destroy them? So in theory, they should be meeting on the battlefield and doing their best to destroy each other.
Well, they're not saying that. Israel's not saying they're not their goals in Lebanon are distinctly different than their goals in Gaza. They're not saying they're there to destroy Hezbollah. They the closest they've come is to say is to
Push them
degrade
north.
them. And they every single day they say targeted, delimited, you know,
But that's just noise. That's just what they say.
well, they're relying on the 98th division that came out of Gaza. So we know this is the thing. We don't have to wonder who their army is. Like when Nasrallah says, you and
With
whose
what army?
army,
Yeah,
Habibi.
yeah.
We know the army. They're the army.
But they're
Uh,
saying 70,000 men are there now.
there's three divisions. There was two already there, and they brought the 98th. So yeah, I'm not sure about those numbers, 70,000.
That's more than three divisions.
Yeah,
Um,
I think that's an inflated number.
and who invaded Jabalia just now?
The 162nd moved from Rafah to Jabalia on the
So
weekend.
there's nobody in Rafah?
They just left like they left two brigades in Rafah. And the 162nd division is more than a division.
Okay,
Um,
it's a
it,
plus.
it
It's
was
an
a plus
overstrength.
division. And that was one of the ways that they did. They played games with the troop numbers with the Americans by saying, because their previous moves were to go multi-division. When they raided
Mhm.
Khan Yunis, it was multi-division. When they raided Gaza City the first time, it was three divisions going into
That's
Gaza
wise if
City.
you're whatever.
So this time, when they were talking about their red lines with the Americans, they were saying we're going to do it differently. And one of the different things was that they weren't going to send a second division. But what
But
they
the
did was
Americans
they just
also, yeah.
stacked that one. that one division with more brigades than are normally in a division.
So right now there's no, so they just moved the the 162nd from Rafah to Jabalia. There's no additional troops that they sent into Gaza.
There's no additional troops to do that. That's the thing. So when the 98th Division left Gaza, that raiding division, once they left, there's no replacement coming in and taking over that raiding job. This army is stretched. It's exhausted. Its resources are stretched. And I was surprised. I was surprised by what happened on the weekend. The Jabalia raid, I didn't understand where the troops were coming from. And then Army
Couldn't even.
Radio put it out shortly after the raid started. And it seems to me what's happening is that they moved those troops up because they also want more troops on the Nitzarim corridor. I'll get into this more on Wednesday, but they want more troops on the Nitzarim corridor because they were worried about people trying to push their way home on the
Mhm.
October 7th anniversary. So they wanted to have more troops there to massacre people to
You
uh,
don't mean home in the Gaza envelope. You mean home.
I mean, people
Yeah.
who've been driven from their homes and are in southern Gaza and want to come back home to north of the Netzarim corridor that has been blocked. The
And there's
Israelis
no.
fear a mass. The Israelis don't have enough troops in Gaza to prevent a mass push on. That's why they've carried out these selective massacres of groups of people that have approached the, you know, whatever you want to call it, the red line zone, the line in the, like
Mhm.
basically literally the line in the sand. If people get too close to it, they just massacre them. And they've done that half a dozen times throughout the course of the war. When people attempt to go back, they walk back along we've seen it a few times when thousands of people
Mhm.
start to march back. And because everybody's been pushed out of Rafah and are now in the middle camps, the ability for that number to be large and to happen quickly for the Israelis, the way they see it, is that that could happen quickly. And so
Mhm.
they want to protect against that by moving those troops. And then they keep people tied up um, in Jabalia and
Tents.
keep people
And
running,
then they
right?
can do tent massacres.
And they do they're massacring people in the shelters because that's the only place that people are left in now.
Yeah.
So they can't stop the massacres, and any kind of organization they consider to be Hamas. So they attack it. They can't attack the fighters. They didn't kill 5,000 fighters in Rafah. There's still the Rafah brigade is still exists in Rafah. They The Khan Yunis brigade attacked them in a multi-staged ambush that I'll show on Wednesday on the EI
Yeah, I
show.
saw that.
And then on Sunday, they went into Jabalia and there was an avalanche of resistance report operations
Yeah.
that are happening. So you've been to Jabalia 4 times now, and you keep saying that you
It's gonna be
control
different.
Jabalia, and every time you go back, the first minute you come back. In fact, this time we got a field report from Sarai Quds, their sniper video that I posted yesterday. That video came out before it was understood that, like, before the Israelis had admitted that they were coming back into Jabalia. The
Mhm.
first time they approach the area, they're hit by formally organized military forces, not by guerrillas that are harassing them.
Yeah.
They're fighting in territorial
Formation.
units.
Yeah.
They're not, the guys from Jabalia didn't run down to Rafah
Right.
to try to save the Rafah brigade. The Rafah brigade is still intact fighting in Rafah. The
And that's
Jabalia brigade stayed in Jabalia after the Israelis pulled out. They didn't run to Shujaiya to fight in
so
Shujaiya.
Hezbollah has both of those. Hezbollah has units in the villages as well as a reserve that can go to if they want to have
Yeah.
a big battle. If there's lots of Israelis and they want to have a big battle, they can meet them
Yeah. They
wherever.
have territorial division. They have territorial, they call them units. They have territorial units, and then they have an unknown number. The number the Israelis believe is more than 6,000 Radwan special forces units. And so those units are in addition to the territorial units.
Mhm.
And those territorial units will fight independent of that of
Right.
whether they have a commander. The fact that their commander was killed doesn't change their small unit tactics and ability to fight.
And that's the scale of the battle anyway. It's in a village. It's almost it's hand to hand almost.
Yeah.
Machine guns maybe.
Well, that's why it's so close, because the way that the terrain works is that you can have cover
Yeah.
until the very last moment. And so
Mhm.
the fights are close quarters battles,
Yeah,
even
that's what
though
you
so
hear,
you
zero distance.
yeah, is yeah,
Yeah,
close
zero
quarters
cover.
battles is what the Israelis are reporting. Um, because that's the way the mountains work. You can be concealed until a certain point, and then you're in that conflict. Whereas in the cities, you have to have the belt of fire, then you have to move your troops up, and then you have to come into the city, and then the close quarters battle
Yeah,
happens.
you relax, you hang out,
If you're
and
a
then
kilometer back, you're not in a close quarters battle. In the mountains, you could be a kilometer away and really quickly find yourself in a face
mhm.
to face fight because of the ability to conceal. And that's what we don't know. We don't have a full understanding of the fortifications of Hezbollah along the border area.
So I
We
yeah,
we
so
do
all
know
right.
it in Binj.
Time will tell, but I think the Israelis are I think this is the war. I think this is the total war. I think this is the invasion. I think this is all of those things. But
They're going to lose.
yeah, and they're
They're
gonna
going to
lose.
lose.
But like, yeah, when has that ever stopped them before? I mean, at some point they are gonna lose and really lose. But like they seem to just produce enough resources to keep losing.
Hezbollah hit Haifa for the first time in the war.
Yeah,
Like fired on a civilian area for the first time in the entire war.
and it won't be the last, probably.
And that's why you never hear Israeli death counts. Like with every single
Hmm.
story about October 7th,
Hmm.
every single story we've ever heard says 1,200 people
1,200,
were
1,200,
killed.
1,200.
You've never heard them say how many Israelis have been killed in the fight in Lebanon, because the number is literally a hand, like you can count it on one hand.
Hmm.
They're targeting military positions and evacuated
Yeah.
towns. So
Okay.
Abu Obeida.
Abu Obeida. Did you get the sense that he kind of implied that October 7th, 2023, which we have to start adding the year to now, was a preemption?
Yeah, he said it very clearly.
Yeah.
Yeah, he called it a preemptive attack. He's called that before. Sinwar called it that in the movie that Sinwar gave the award
Hmm.
for. It was the same thing. It was framed as a preemptive attack.
Yeah, I mean that's interesting, and it makes a lot of sense. I mean, he talked about, well, of course, all the salutes to, all the saluting Yemen, Lebanon, Nasrallah, the Haniya, all of those were important. He talked about it as a preemptive attack. He said he reiterated that they're ready for years of attrition.
Yeah. And I think that when he talked about the support fronts, I think that the support fronts have really kind of come into their own in the
Mm.
last and we haven't heard from Abu Obeida
Yeah, it's been a long time.
for a while.
I was worried about him too.
And his we've heard about him through messages. He's
Yeah.
sent text messages. but we hadn't seen him deliver a speech in many months.
Hmm.
And in those months, the support fronts have really
Stepped
coalesced in
up.
a way.
Yeah.
The Iraqi resistance is a factor now.
Yeah.
The Israelis are dealing with them every day. They're
Yeah.
aiming their drones and
Casualties in
cruise
Golan.
missiles. They're getting casualties. They're requiring fighter jets up in the air. The naval blockade is formidable blockade, and it's a devastating economic blockade on Israel.
And the
Um,
Palestine 2 missile, I mean, they showed it testing, and it was like, wow, look at that. They painted a kafia on it. That's amazing. And now it's just like Palestine 2 missile hits Tel Aviv again. I've lost count. It's probably 4 or 5 now.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. They just announced another one today.
Yeah.
Maybe it might have been multiple today. Yeah, and those yeah, the the ability for Hezbollah to launch the missiles of the category that Iran fired from so much closer,
Mhm.
it's clear that they're not making that decision because they could do
You
it.
don't think that when the day they killed all those commanders, Israel said they destroyed a whole bunch of missile sites?
I mean, I think that they've destroyed missile sites. I think that they admit they've destroyed something like 10% of the rocket launching sites. I don't think Israel has a super strong idea of how many missiles there are, and a lot of them are buried. Um,
So you really think that the capacity to do damage to Israeli cities is still there?
oh
Hmm.
yeah, oh yeah. I would say that it's at if the Israelis are saying 10%, I think it's probably half that,
Hmm.
and they're talking about Katyushas. The strategic
So when
missiles haven't been used.
so when Kirby said that Hezbollah is not the same organization that it was a couple weeks ago, you don't really think that that's
I think it's literally true because they lost their command, but there's no indication that they've lost fighting capacity.
mm,
No, not at all. And I think that it's sort of a something that's known in the military that uh, soldiers soldiers don't think their leaders are all that. I think there's a lot of soldiers that think that they don't need their leaders. Like, all due respect to their leaders, we're talking
yeah.
about very different things. And Abu Obeida took that straight on. He said,
Mm, yeah.
if assassinations were effective, the assassination of Sheikh Izzuddin al-Qassam in 1935 in the hills of Jenin would have ended the armed struggle.
Hmm.
He said that the assassinations of the founding leadership, which happened when I was in Palestine between 2002 and 2004, they took
Hmm.
out all of the founding members in that period. That
Antizi, Yassin.
Ratizi Shahada, yeah, Adnan Al Ghul, um, yeah, they all they took. There was like a dozen that they took out, and he said if those assassinations of those founding members
Hmm.
worked, there wouldn't be an October 7th.
Yeah.
He said, Abu Baida said, if destroying houses and
Hmm.
arresting uh, fighters destroyed the resistance would have been destroyed after Operation Defensive Shield in the West Bank in 2002. And part of his speech was a deep part of his speech was to salute the West Bank, and he named every single town in the West Bank. He was very clear about that. And so those what we have been witnessing over the last 3 weeks is shocking, but it's separate from the capacity of the organization to fight the 98th and 36th Division of the Israeli military. And if you believe that their statements about delimited, targeted, that
I
these
don't.
things, if those are not true, in an open war between Hezbollah fighters and Israel's army that we've watched for the last year, because Israel believes that they're battle tested. That's what Halevi brags about in his messages to his soldiers.
Mm.
Those are part of the things that I read all the time is what when he's addressing his soldiers. Um, yeah, and he believes that this is the most advanced army that Israel's ever had because they've fought for a year in Gaza. And the 98th Division did fight for a year. The 98th Division fought in Khan Yunis. Um, and so they fought for months and months in a direct engagement that was supposed to last only a few months, and they had to be rotated out because they weren't successful. And then it
Is
was
that
after
battle
that.
tested if you go somewhere and are repulsed
Yeah, that's what I'm
after
saying. They're
committing a bunch
saying
of crimes?
Israel's saying that that is their best fighters they've ever had, and they're routinely uh, getting driven out of all of the areas that they go into. And every single area that they go into, they've never achieved a single objective in any of those areas. The 98th Division has achieved nothing. They were in Khan Yunis. They achieved nothing in Khan Yunis. A second, they had to send a paratroopers um, brigade in after them to fight the battles that the 98th Division couldn't fight. And they pulled out when they fought in Shifa, they pulled out in Shifa by just burning it. They didn't achieve their objectives in Shifa. They didn't achieve their objectives in Jabalia camp. They pulled out of southern Jabalia camp when they invaded. And the fighters in Jabalia were like, oh, we thought that they were going to continue through the southern camp, and they didn't. They haven't achieved anything. It's,
Yeah, but yeah. I mean, they're gonna do a unilateral air war on Lebanon,
yeah. And that's the
which
thing that's just, that's
yeah.
that's the part of that they have a, an almost an infinite amount of destructive capabilities. And one of the things that the Americans have proved is that they'll continue to give them that.
Yeah,
But Abu
so
Obeida
this
talked
is
about that too, right? He said that that shows the weakness of Israel. It's framed it in his speech not as the strength of Israel, but as the weakness of Israel, that they're just held on by strings by the Americans.
ropes that'll inevitably be cut. But I don't even really think there is an Israel. I think this is just a US war on the people of the region. The thing is like what one thing that I just think there's something missing in terms of deterrence because and that's why I can't like I don't see how Israel can be stopped be, Israel's air force can't be stopped by continually defeating their army and foiling their army's objectives.
Yeah.
They're just two separate problems.
And that was the strategic paradigm that Nasrallah talked about for 15 years, right?
Yeah.
That the deterrence was that they could waste
Yeah. And yeah,
all those high value targets in Haifa.
I don't see how, you know, I don't know. I don't know how this is not that time. Like, what are you saving it for? Like, this is Israel laying waste to Lebanon now. That's what they're doing. And I don't know. I don't know.
I think the command structure that can make that decision, I think is in
Dead.
a
Yeah.
well, it's in a position of being reconstituted, and you can see things have changed from Hezbollah, right? Like
Yeah.
when they were first happening, they were releasing the name of every single person.
Yeah, they can't do that. They can't do that anymore.
They
They
can't
can't
do
do that
that.
because, like, if they may have killed the successor, right? They may have killed
But
Safedin, and
now
if
they're
they,
not saying.
yeah, they're not saying they should, and they shouldn't say. They shouldn't say.
But
But
with
it's like,
every pager operation, when
yeah,
the pager operation, they put their names up and they said where they were from and they
yeah,
gave
that's gone.
all.
That's all over now. That's got to be over now. But the other thing is like the fact that Iran got involved directly, and Iran, the Ayatollah. Did you watch the Ayatollah's speech?
No, I
Oh,
just saw the summary of it.
well, I watched it, and there were phrases that he said that were not different, all that different from what Abu Obeida said tonight.
Oh, really? So what you thought that he was for real? Oh
Oh
yeah. Okay.
yeah, yeah, yeah. Oh yeah, he, yeah, absolutely. But what he said was they will, when they're finished with one country, they'll move on to the next,
Yeah.
and and it was like that's not how Nasrallah talked. Nasrallah was like, we will stop them because they're running out of gas. And the Ayatollah was like, they will be stopped only when they're stopped. And Abu Obeida said that too. Abu Obeida said they only understand the language of force.
Yeah.
And it's like I think Hamas got that before everyone else, but I do think I mean nobody has to explain anything to Yemen.
Yeah, Abu Obeida. I liked Abu Obeida shouted out the million
Man
multi-million
marches, yeah.
marches of Fridays. I liked that. I liked his summary of October 7th as a historic strategic attack versus the Gaza division and its detestable settlement belt.
Criminal, yeah. Yeah.
Our people are the backbone of the resistance, and your sacrifices will not be in vain.
Yeah.
The support fronts are ablaze. You, Lebanon, Yemen, and Iraqi drones soar through Israel's skies, draining its resources and defense capabilities, causing economic and military losses. He cited the sea blockade again, and he said, now with Iran, with an unprecedented historic shattering of Israel's impunity,
Yeah.
that the missile strike was the first time there was a red line given to Israel, which I thought that was a significant, yeah. Israel
Uh,
despised by all free
Free
people in the
people.
world with its only ability, this is startup nation with
Hmm.
only the ability to build walls, fences, and buffer zones and relies on air power and bombs from the United States. The only thing that keeps Israel alive is the strings of the US that's despised even by its own people, which is, just an astute statement.
So year two. Year two begins. What are we gonna do differently in year two?
I started a Hezbollah log. I mean, it's interesting to see that Hezbollah operations went from 13 in a day to 35 in a day.
Yeah.
You can see that by keeping a log.
Yeah, yeah. When you keep a log, these things just jump right out
They
at you.
jump off the page. Yeah,
All right.
thousands killed. Is that it for Obeida? Abu Obeida?
I think so.
I think that was the line. If assassinations worked, the arms struggle would have
Oh, I
ended
mean,
with.
he sort of threatened but didn't the hostages.
Oh yeah,
He said we are not going to kill the hostages, but this but they may not make it home kind of thing.
yeah. He said about that. He said that the prisoners matter to them because they're
Hmm.
the ticket to getting our prisoners out. We've looked after them since day one. It's according to our belief system, and you know it
Yeah.
it goes against our beliefs to kill them. He didn't say we killed them, but he did refer to the six in Rafah
Yeah.
in
And
a
he said
way.
what happened to them might happen to more.
Yeah, and the instructions are given to the guards
Their discretion.
that they have operational discretion
Hmm.
in those circumstances, and that you're going to end up with 100 Ron Arads. And Ron Arad was the Israeli pilot that went down over Lebanon and never returned, and Israel
Well,
never.
like if Iran does indeed have the S-400 system and Russians staffing it, which lots of people think they do, then Israeli pilots flying to Iran to bomb Iran, they could end up
Yeah,
in front of
that's not what
they
their
could
analysts are saying. Their
they could,
analysts are saying that they can stealth down that nuclear corridor,
okay,
pushing. I mean, there's a whole Washington think tank
okay,
apparatus that wants a war with Iran so bad.
sure. But they could end up in front of cameras. They could end up in front of cameras on Iranian TV too.
Yeah,
Maybe that'll happen in year two.
yeah, year two.
Um, all right. Well, we'll
Thank you
still
to
be
our
here
Yeah, thank you to our audience for continuing to
hanging in
follow
there.
our work.
We
And
may not be here in year two. There's a lot of people that have been taken off YouTube, John.
oh,
Uh, yeah, I just it seems like the kiss of death is interviewing Morandi, which you guys have done. So there's like two or three channels that interviewed Morandi and were immediately like taken off of YouTube.
oh yeah, like just today?
Well, Rachel Blevins, who had like a bigger channel, like we have 20,000 or something. Rachel Blevins had like 70,000 subscribers. They took her down. DD Geopolitics, they took them down.
Did they say? Did they
No,
speak about what the reason was?
no, just the timing was suspicious in the sense of like it was. I think in both cases, at least in Rachel's case, it was right after she interviewed Mohammed Morandi. So. And he was on another show today that I listened to where he was like, "Thank you for having me on, even though every channel I go on seems to get shut down."
That's so ridiculous. He's the like number one spokesperson on
Right.
all of the major, like he's
Mm.
the guy who he's the go-to guy for BBC World
Yeah.
Service when something happens in Iran.
Yeah. Well, so yeah,
We would
people
welcome
people in the
BBC
comments
getting
have
shut
said try
down.
Rumble. You guys have tried Rumble, right?
Um,
And
yeah, we have a Rumble channel.
I also think Substack does video. So you guys look for me on Substack and, and Rumble. I'm gonna be here until they kick me off, but when they kick me off, find me there.
Yeah. Yeah,
So
please stay with us, audience. It's a very siloed media world, and
yeah,
it's yeah,
but
it's
it does make it worth it the way you guys interact with us and the comments and everything.
yeah, and we read the comments and we get the messages, and I just want to say I appreciate that for people that do that. And yeah, stay strong. It's the people in Gaza, the courage and determination and resilience and character that they show every single day. It's there to be seen in every brutal massacre. There's dozens of people there helping,
Yeah.
giving what they can. Uh, it's just there. It's a dark time, but there's a lot of a lot of bright lights of people carrying on with courage and resilience through this period that in Gaza under the most difficult circumstances that we just have to keep going. There's no other way.
Okay, guys. Till next time. Thanks, John.
See you guys.